Welcome to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
I'm Julie. Did you forget?
I'm like, what's next? What do we do next? Settle in, everybody.
Okay.
So, I'm going to preface this by saying, I know this is a story that everybody knows about. But when it came up, and I really sat and thought about what I knew about it, I realized it was not much. So I wanted to delve further.
Is it creepy?
Not creepy. No, not really. So today, I'm going to tell you the story of the Donner Party.
Oh. Okay.
And it was one of those things where it was like, if you had asked me what I knew about, I'd be like, yeah, I know the Donner Party. And then I'd be like, they were going west.
Right.
They got stuck. And they started eating each other. That's all I would have known.
Yeah.
And I had recently watched American Primeval on Netflix, which is sort of around the same time frame. And it was quite interesting. So I'm kind of in that mood. And
What is it? Is it like a documentary?
no, it's a little mini series.
Oh, okay. Like a fictional one.
Mostly, but
Okay.
it's like based in, so one of the forts that I talk about in this was in that show. It talks about the Mormons moving into Utah and kind of, I found out a lot about Mormons.
Oh. Is that going to be in your story today?
Nah,
Okay.
no, I'm going to leave that.
Gonna leave that alone.
Never mind. So anyway, I highly recommend it. Plus, I love Taylor Kitsch. So that being said, this is the mind space I'm in right now. So I felt like this would be interesting. I'm going to say there are a lot of names. I use a lot of names. Nobody really had any creativity when it came to names. So there's a lot of the same names. And
Jedediah or something.
I don't expect you to remember, but I do my best to sort of talk about most of them when they pass and stuff like that. So bear with me.
Okay.
Keep track if you can. In order to talk about the Donner Party, it's also called the Donner Reed Party, we kind of have to talk about the Oregon Trail. One of the things I realized is that when I say the state, I say Oregon.
They
And
say
when
Oregon.
I used to say the trail, I would say Oregon Trail.
Don't like Oregonians.
Oregonians.
Don't they say,
Oregonese.
don't they say Oregon?
Oregon.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, it was something I noticed, and then I was like really stumbling on it. So the Oregon Trail, there's also a horror movie called Oregon Trail. Yeah. Didn't watch it. Looks
gonna say-
really, really great. So the Oregon Trail is 2,170 miles long. It ran from the Missouri River Valley to the Oregon Territory. And it ran through what are now Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and of course, Oregon.
Okay.
The trail was originally laid in 1811.
It started off. Wow. I feel like Kansas is really central, but
It is.
I mean to us. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's a lot more central than, but yes, it's east, pretty east to them. Now, bear in mind at this time, so this story happens in 1846. California is a Mexican territory,
Right.
and the Mexican-American War is raging in California. That's just something that was going on at the time. Anyway, when the trail was originally laid in 1811, it was really meant for people on horseback or on foot. They didn't fix it to accommodate wagons until 1836.
I mean, wouldn't you just have to do it as you went?
Kind
know?
of. Yeah. I think. No, we're going to talk a little bit about how important timing is. So I kind of feel like if you weren't in a rush, you could help clear the trail.
Yeah, you run out
It
of
was
food.
such a time frame to get to where you needed to go. So there are offshoots from the main trail, a lot of them. But a few of the major ones were the California Trail, the Mormon Trail, which ran from Illinois to Utah, and the Bozeman Trail, which moved further into Wyoming.
Just picturing the map in my head.
Oh, I had to be like, where is The things you realize you don't know. You're like, I know the general area, but
Yeah.
when it comes to actual...
I used to have a puzzle. Like you put, with the little knobs on
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Like Wyoming was a lot further north
Oh, yeah.
than I think I envisioned at first. This makes me sound stupid. I don't... They're all those square states right in that area. So over the course of its use, around 400,000 people use the Oregon Trail to get west.
That's a lot of people.
A lot of people, especially in that time frame. How many people...
Yeah. That just
around.
Well, but also that are willing to do it, because that's scary.
And that's... So there's so much... certainly there was manifest destiny and but we should be... God would like us to settle the rest of the country.
And the gold doesn't hurt.
The gold hit a few years after this, that the rush of 49, because this was 1846 was kind of the last big year. The number started to dwindle quite a bit of people who used the trail until 49.
Oh, okay.
And, because I think at that point I was they were going to other parts. You weren't necessarily going all the way to the coast. You were starting to settle more. There was so little on the plains at the time, random forts and stuff. So that's the Oregon Trail. The original Donner Party, because a lot of people were added along the way to the party. The original Donner Party planned to travel a total of around 2,500 miles. They were starting in Springfield, Illinois, which was where they lived. And they had to make it from Springfield, Illinois to Independence, Missouri.
Okay.
Which is the start of the trail.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I think it said, it's about 250 miles from their homes to Independence.
I was going to say, I don't think it's not really, I mean, it's not far for us now. We have cars, but.
We could drive it in less than, yes, of course. Well, so on April 15th, 1846, 9 covered wagons headed out on the 250-mile trip to get to Independence. Here we're starting with the names. George and Tamsin Donner and their children, Aletha, I think it's Aletha, because there's also an Eliza. So I'm like, you didn't say Elitha and Eliza, did you?
Yeah.
So we're going to call her Aletha for all intents and purposes. Leanna, Francis, George, and Eliza. These children aged from 14 to 3.
Imagine being a 14-year-old and they're like, so we're going to move. Great.
I don't know. Yeah, but a 14-year-old then?
I'm not going to know anyone at school.
Or you're like, I'm getting ready to marry.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
They're going to be married off soon. Jacob, George's brother, and his wife Elizabeth, their children, Solomon, William, George, Mary, Isaac, Louis, and Samuel, aged 14 to 1. They had 6 teamsters with them. These were the people who drove the wagon teams. Charles Berger, Augustus Spitzer. Now, some sources list Augustus as having joined up later with a different family, but I think I figured out the discrepancy. Hiram Miller, John Denton, Samuel Schumacher, and Noah James. These people were all in the early 20s to very early 30s.
Okay, so there were some adults. I was going to say, is it mostly children?
Oh my God, though. So many children. They just keep adding children. The Reeds were neighbors of the Donners, and they decided to head out with them. So James and Margaret and their children, Virginia, Martha, Jane, a.k.a. Patty, because that's a shortened version of Jane. James and Thomas, aged 13 to 3. Margaret's mother, Sarah Keyes, also joined them.
How old was she? Was she old?
I want to say she was 60.
Oh, no, I'm not.
In her 60s. George Donner was 60.
I don't want to go now.
Not in a wagon, but Oregon's beautiful.
Yeah.
Not that they went to Oregon, but Northern California is beautiful. Their family had 3 teamsters to drive their team: Milt Elliott, Walter Heron, and James Smith. James Reed also brought 2 other paid staff: a handyman named Bayless Williams and his sister Eliza Williams, their cook.
Fancy.
Right. I think he was a businessman. He was Irish American.
So I feel like you'd feel pretty good being like, okay, yeah, it's a lot of our kids, but like, there's people who know how to do this stuff and they're professionals.
Yeah.
At least in your mind, that's what they are.
Yeah. You realize how, I mean, if we were out in the elements, we wouldn't know what to do. No. It's horrible. It's horrible what happened.
Well, yeah. Have you ever played the game? Like,
there's no dysentery on this.
Oh, good.
In this.
I don't know what's worse, though.
I don't think. Wait, what's the one? Anyway, so like I mentioned before, timing on the Oregon Trail is crucial. The Donner Party left just after the spring rainy season ended. So, mud in the plains, but that had tapered off and it was starting to dry up. But they also left early enough that they would be unlikely to encounter snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is the last stretch of the trip to California. They did leave towards the end of the season for the trail, though. They were probably like one of the last wagon trains to actually head out that year.
He said April, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They left April 15th. On May 10th, so almost a month to go 250 miles, the group made it to Independence, Missouri. They spent a couple days getting ready for the trip, like buying some last minute supplies, and the group left on May 12th from Independence. A week later, on the 19th, they met up with a wagon train in Indian Creek, which it sounds like people did. Like you just kind of happened upon other groups and you'd be like, I feel like there's probably safety in numbers at that point. And so you're like, hey, can we tag along? The group spent the next 4 days, so from the 27th of May to the 31st, ferrying the wagons over the Big Blue River via rafts that they had fashioned, because it was running so high, so much higher than they expected. So I don't know if you've ever seen like some rivers you can just drive the wagons through.
Yeah.
This was not.
Well, it was like rapids at that point.
Right. So it took them 4 days to get all the wagons. But you figure you've attached yourself to another wagon train. You already had 9. How many wagons that must have been to get across a river?
Yeah, how many rafts?
I think they had I don't know for sure. More than one.
I hope so.
So it took 4 days. During this stretch of time, Sarah Keyes, the mother of Margaret Reed, the older lady, she died of tuberculosis. She had been sick prior to the trip even starting anyway, so not that that's...
She got off easy.
I mean... So this is when several other families joined the wagon train, and ultimately they would veer off with the Donner Party. So Lavina Murphy, she was a widow. Her children, John Landrum, Miriam, a.k.a. Mary, Lemuel, 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 I think.
Yeah.
William and Simon, they were aged 16 to 8, so a little bit older, probably more likely to be able to care for themselves a little bit better. Her older daughters also came along. Sarah Murphy Foster and her husband William Foster. Their 1-year-old named Jeremiah. Harriet Pike and William Pike. A lot of Williams. A lot of them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And their 2 children, Naomi and Catherine, aged 3 and 1.
It's a lot of kids.
I'm not done. William and Eleanor Eddy and their 2 children, James and Margaret, 3 and 1. Patrick and Margaret Breen, a.k.a. Peggy, their children, get ready, John, Edward, Patrick Jr., Simon, James, Peter, and Isabella, aged 14 to 11 months old.
Can you imagine just doing that on like a plane ride? Just like everybody.
Be quiet. Yes. Patrick Dolan, who was the Breen's neighbor, he was just this young single dude. He came along. Louis and Elizabeth Philippine Keysberg, they end up calling her Philippine the whole time. They were German immigrants. Their children, so Ada was 2 years old when they got there, and Philippine was pregnant with Louis Jr.
Oh, no.
He ended up being born on the trail.
Even more than I'm not going to go anyway. I'm not going if I'm pregnant.
Yeah. So with the Kesebergs, they were traveling with Jacob Carl Wolfinger and his wife, Doris. They also, people believe they were also German immigrants. They seemed to have some money. Joseph Reinhardt, and according to other sources, this is where Augustus Spitzer comes in. But I actually think you're going to hear another name that like doesn't really ever come up later. Again, bear in mind, people, this is the 1840s. Give me a break. They are associates of the Wolfingers. Elderly men whose last name is Hardcoop. Nobody ever mentions his first name. So I don't know that anybody even knew. He was a Belgian immigrant. He was traveling with them. The Wolfingers' driver, Dutch Charlie, is what they called him.
How many people are we up to now?
A lot. But there's more coming.
Holy crap.
And then Luke Halloran, just some young single dude. It's like, yeah, let's go west.
I don't know. Is it better to have this many people, or?
I think
We'll see.
I think you'll see that yes and no. There were circumstances where more bodies were probably welcomed, and then there were others where you were like, stay away from my shit.
Yeah, okay.
So according to a letter written by Tamsin Donner around this time, the wagon train had made it to the Platte River on June 16th, and she described the trip as easy up to that point, even after the floating of the wagons. So she was optimistic. So the party reached Fort Laramie in Wyoming on June 27th, where James Reed encountered a mountaineer named James Kleiman, because you're either James or you're William.
Yeah.
He told Reed about this new route to California that he had just traveled by horse, bear that in mind, with the guy who claimed to have discovered it, Lansford Hastings. So Kleiman and this guy Hastings had just come from California via this route.
Oh, backwards, basically.
Hastings had published The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California. He had not traveled his own shortcut until that year, and even then, he hadn't done it with a wagon. He'd only done it with horses. Kleiman told Reed, do not take that shortcut. This shortcut was being called Hastings Cutoff. On July 17th, the group made it to Independence Rock, which is just a literal giant rock in Wyoming. And they met a man heading east who had flyers about Hastings Cutoff. If they wanted to take it, which the flyer said they should meet Hastings at Fort Bridger, and he'd get them there.
Is that like the only way, really?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
On July 19th, a portion of the wagon train decided that they did want to try the cutoff. They also decided that George Donner would lead them going forward, and they separated from the larger party the next day. Fort Bridger is located near this area called Black Forks. The new Donner Party arrived at Fort Bridger a week later on July 27th. Hastings had already left with another wagon train, but he told Jim Bridger, who is the owner of the establishment, however much you can own that stuff. So he told Jim Bridger to give any arriving parties the guidance to follow the path he would lead for them. So he had to go. He went with another wagon train like a week before and said, but I'll leave you notes along the way, almost like trail markers. So the Flyers and Jim Bridger told the Donner Party that they would shorten their trip to California by almost 400 miles. Wowee. How could you not?
Right.
They were also told that the trail was easily passable for wagons, and it offered plenty of opportunities to graze livestock, and get water. On the contrary, Edwin Bryant, a journalist that had been part of that original big wagon train that they happened upon, he reached Bridger Fort before the Donner Party and started heading towards Hastings Cutoff. He saw the beginning of it and knew immediately the wagons are not going to make it. And he also knew how many kids were with the Donner Party. And he was like, they're not going to do this. He went all the way back to the fort and left letters for the Donner Party
That's nice of them.
telling them, don't go this way.
Yeah.
The letters never got to the Donners.
Oh, no. Wow.
It is believed that Jim Bridger kept them because it is beneficial for him if people take Hastings cut off because his fort is right there.
Right.
So if people, oh yeah, plenty of people have made it.
What a dick.
Right? Well, people were, it was kind of a every man for himself kind of feel, if I'm being honest.
You can't have customers if they don't make it.
Well, but they're not coming back to him.
Well, yeah.
He's like, because then what if the Donners leave and go like, oh shoot, yeah, we don't want to go that way.
Yeah, that's
they
true.
head back from his, and they start telling people, no, don't go that way. They don't even make it to Bridger now. You know?
Money.
I mean, I'm not condoning it. Oh, we have more people coming. The McCutcheon family and a random 16-year-old, a 6-year-old just happened upon it. No.
Wandered off.
I don't know who this kid is. He's got a lot of experience. The McCutcheon family and a 16-year-old on his own joined the party at Black Forks. William and Amanda McCutcheon, their 2-year-old daughter, Harriet. The 16-year-old was named Jean-Baptiste Trudeau. He claimed to be familiar with the upcoming terrain, and he promised that he knew a thing or two about Native Americans and that he would be helpful if they encountered any along the way.
I mean, why would you think otherwise, I suppose?
I know. And I guess, like, in 1846, 16 is like, maybe. That's very likely. Yeah. Not today's 16.
No.
So on July 31st, the party headed off from Black Forks and went in the direction of Hastings Cutoff.
Wait, so hold on.
Yes.
The guy...
No, there's a lot of stuff. It's fine.
I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. The guy who was going to leave the letters, like, you said he had, like, a wagon, and he went...
I don't think he did.
Okay. But he... So what, he just, like, knew more and was like, that trail's really small, width-wise.
Yes.
And when they got there, they were like, sure, it'll be fine. We'll just try.
So, throughout this trip, there's a little bit of back and forth.
Well, there's so many people, I guess. There's a lot of, like, opinions.
Of people.
Okay.
And so many opinions. And, like, George Donner's in charge, but you get the feeling that, like, James Reed really thinks maybe he should be in charge. And
also,
so...
they've gone to... Some of them have, like, joined. You can, like, unjoin. You can be like...
You can.
Screw you.
Yes, you can. But... Now, the other thing is, you're like, what on earth? I think George Donner was a farmer. So you're like, what about, is it because he's kind of the elder guy that you're like, yeah, we'll follow you. You came with the most people. I don't know what would have, it's not like he's done it.
Yeah.
You know?
Used to, like, I don't know.
So.
Not traveling.
And I think the other thing is, so I'll put maps on Instagram so you can kind of see how they break off. And it's one of those things that, like, at some point you kind of have to go, if we just go, let's just go. Hastings is assuring us it's going to be easier. Why would somebody lie about that? It's just going to be so much more time if we have to, because
double back and all
bear
that,
in mind, Hastings Cutoff breaks away from Oregon Trail and then comes back to it.
Oh, right, because it was like a shortcut or whatever.
So no matter what way they go, they have to make it through the Sierra Nevada mountains. And they have to do it before the snow falls.
Yeah.
And so I think at some point you have to go like, we just have to go. We just have to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, no matter what. Right, because time is not slowing down.
Right, no. And everything takes forever.
God.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. You get that. This is very long. There's a lot of minutia. So as you have questions, just do not hesitate. So again, July 31st, they're leaving the fort. They're heading on. At first, they were easily able to follow the markers that Hastings had left for them, and the trail seemed pretty manageable. They made it to Echo Canyon and on the Weber River, which is in Utah, on August 6th. They discovered, I know,
So
6 days.
Right. But the whole summer is like gone
Right.
practically. Shit.
Well,
Okay.
and that's right. So at this point, you're a week in almost, and it seemed manageable. He's left you, you're going to double back a week.
Yeah.
So you have to, yeah. So also on the 6th, they discovered a message from Hastings indicating that they would not be able to pass the trail ahead and that they should send a couple people ahead. I'm not sure if they went ahead on foot or with horses. It's not super clear, but he said to send a couple people ahead to get instructions from him for an alternative route. And that's almost the most frustrating part is you're like, if it weren't for these damn wagons, we'd have been fine. But that's all your stuff. And you have 1,000 children with you.
Right.
And because there's a lot of, you'll hear several instances of people going, making it to a destination and then having to come back, which must have been so frustrating.
Yeah.
James Reed and 2 other men started following the wagon tracks while the rest of the group stayed behind. Reed returned 4 days later. Hastings had guided him to an alternative route through the Wasatch Mountains. Again, it's all mountain.
No, that's what,
For a while.
Oh.
So around this point, the Graves family join up.
You're like, just hang out wherever you are.
We don't know what we're doing, but sure. So Franklin and Elizabeth Graves, their children, Mary, William, Eleanor, Lavina, Nancy, Jonathan, Franklin Jr., and Elizabeth, ages 20 to 1.
Well, at least there's some kind of like adulty
It's women.
people. I don't even know why. I don't know. Like, I don't even know. If you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're an adult or not.
No.
But, all right.
Franklin and Elizabeth's eldest daughter, Sarah, her husband, Jay Fosdick, their teamster was John Snyder. Now, there are 23 wagons and 87 people in the group.
Oh my God.
That's
Who's going to be the first wagon? Like, you go. I'm going to be, what did you say, 23? I'm going to be the 23rd.
well, I'm also like, okay, so the Graves have 1 teamster and the Donners have 6.
Yeah.
Why, how can he do it by himself? Anyway, I don't know what it takes. Oxen, I'm also having a hard time picturing what size oxen are.
Big.
There it is. It's big. Anyway, I forgot, I think, until all of this, that's what was pulling. I just envision horses.
Just going to say, I'm like, oh, I envision horses too, and it wouldn't have been bad if you were like, all right, we got to leave our, well, not bad, but like, leave our crap and we'll just
Ride the horses.
weakest. Yeah.
So on August 11th, the group left for the trail that Hastings had showed Reed. Except there was no trail. All of the able-bodied men were needed to move trees, vegetation, and large boulders out of the way. They were moving at a pace of about 1.5 miles a day. Can you...
So, like, where are we now? Are we in, like, September or something?
August 11th.
We're still... Okay.
Yes. They finally left the Weber River and made it to the Salt Lake Valley on August 22nd. So just that trek through the Wasatch Mountains took 11 days. Luke Halloran, one of the single gentlemen that had tagged along, he passed on August 25th, also of tuberculosis.
Oh.
At that same time, they also received another message from Hastings. Just a heads up, kids. You're coming up on a dry area soon. Meaning that they would be without water for like 2 days, maybe.
Yeah, but 2 days is like, what, you said 1.5 miles.
I know, 3 miles.
Jesus.
So in preparation, they spent a couple days gathering water as well as food for their livestock. The last opportunity for fresh water, Redlam Spring, was reached on August 30th. They were about to head into the Great Salt Lake Desert.
Okay, yep, Utah.
It turns out, if you hadn't noticed yet, Hastings was a liar.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Oh my God.
So the journey across the desert took 5 days, not 2 days. And he told them that it was 40 miles wide, but it was actually 80 miles wide.
My
So the Great Salt Lake Desert is essentially like a dry lake. And it's got a salt crust on the ground because deposits were left behind when it dried up. The average temperature during the day in August is around 90 degrees, but then it would drop into the 50s at night.
Yeah.
The ground texture was almost like a gluey clay. And apparently, science, the heat pulled the moisture in the ground to the surface, and it mixed with the salt and made like a paste almost.
Great for wagon wheels.
Right. The wagon wheels were struggling to get through. They ran out of water with 2 days left to go in the desert.
Oh my God.
36 of their cattle died, and 4 of their wagons had to be left behind in the desert because they just couldn't get them out. And also 36 of the cattle died. So you don't have anything to pull. You're losing not only potential food, but animals to even move your stuff.
I mean, I guess you could eat some, like, you could at least butcher them and, well, but then how are you going to pull all that food?
Put it in somebody else's stuff.
I mean, I guess, oh, no.
Yeah. The party finally made it out of the desert, and they spent a week camping out at the base of Pilot Peak in what is now Nevada. They took stock of their supplies and realized that they wouldn't have enough to make it the rest of the way.
What do you even do? You can't go back.
Well, Charles Stanton and William McCutcheon headed out to Sutter's Fort on their own to get more.
Supplies.
This is what I'm saying. Sutter's Fort was located in the area of Sacramento.
Okay.
So they sent 2 dudes
close-ish, kind of.
out and said, go get us stuff and then come back to us.
Right.
But we have to stay here. You're going to be there.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Enough for however many people we have left.
Right.
Okay.
Charles Stanton and William McCutcheon left on September 10th. The rest of the party trekked on and made it to the Humboldt River on September 26th. This is where the cutoff meets up with the usual trail.
Was the trail, like, so much better? Like, son of a bitch.
So the cutoff ended up adding 125 miles to the trip.
Oh my God. I've been so mad.
But how do you even know at that point? You don't. I don't
No,
think you
I
do. I
guess
think somebody
hindsight.
probably figured that out
Yeah.
after the fact. But,
Shoot.
we're going to save you 400 miles. Just kidding. We added 125.
And it's not good for wagons at all.
Right. And some of those days, you did 1.5 miles a day of that
I'm
125.
so upset. How's the pregnant lady? Is she okay?
I think I mentioned it somewhere. He's showing up sometime, the
Okay.
baby. Now they've made it through the cutoff, which was a haul, and took it out of them, because you also have to figure all the men who could were being extremely physically taxed
Yeah, with no water.
by trying to clear the trail. They're probably eating more and drinking more than they would have, and you've had extra time, so now you're out of water. You were in a desert for 5 days. Like, on October 5th, James Reed ended up being ejected from the party when he got into a fight with one of the teamsters. His oxen got tangled up with the team belonging to the Graves. Milt Elliott, who was his teamster, and John Snyder, who was the Graves teamster, started going at it. Reed tried to intervene and help cut the teams apart, so he had a knife. Snyder, in the heat of the moment, hit him with the handle of his whip, and Reed stabbed him in the chest with the knife.
Oh my God. Crap.
Snyder died. The group had to decide what to do with Reed at that point, because, like, there's no law. There's no, like, you don't call the police now. Or so Louis Keseberg, his name's going to come up a lot. Louis Keseberg suggested hanging. Let's just hang him. But the group decided on ejection instead. They sent him off with no supplies and no protection. So you're right.
Yeah.
Some stories say that Reed's wife was also hit by Snyder when she tried to help during the argument, which is arguably a pretty decent reason for him to defend his wife. It's 1846. However, People were getting pretty sick of Reed at this point. He'd pushed the hardest for the Hastings cutoff in the first place. He had also demanded that people share their supplies with his family when they arguably lost probably the most during the trek through the desert.
Oh, okay.
So he demanded that people share with them. The other thing is, now we're in October, the beginning of October. You have been traveling with these people for almost 6 months.
Yeah.
You have no water. Animals are dying. People have started dying.
All your stuff is in the desert.
You're pissed that, especially like maybe you were one of the ones that said, I'm really not comfortable with going this way. So the families are starting to sort of splinter off and it's not really as communal. I have to argue though, and again, I take this from shows that I've seen. I don't know that wagon trains were very communal to begin with. I kind of feel like there was a feeling of you brought your stuff, we brought ours. You should have planned better or something. You know what I mean?
I was thinking that too, because I'm like, that really sucks. Your stuff. No one, I guess, would have known though. Like, if your wagon was the one that got stuck in the desert and your oxen died. I mean, who would know? Maybe you did plan. That's hard because it's like, what are you going to do? Leave my family out in the cold, but also it didn't happen to us, and I have kids too, and yeah, that's hard.
I think people were like, you go now. We're tired of you. But his family stayed with, what were they going to do?
Yeah.
They were sending them off with nothing. It's not like she had to be aware of her own children. So
I didn't like him either. So.
At some point, the Donners had actually gone ahead of everybody else. So apparently the Donners were the ones that were in the front. One of Reed's teamsters, Walter Heron, had gone up with them. But Reed, because he was moving at a much faster pace without the wagons, caught up with them. And Heron decided to go with him. So those two take off, apparently on a horse. And the Donners end up meeting up with the rest of the big group. Okay, so now everybody's together again. Again, the wagons are still struggling. Despite the fact that they're back on the actual trail, it's mountainous.
Yeah. And probably snowing by now.
Right. You're also down some wagons. So people's stuff have gone into other people's wagons. So they're a little bit heavier than maybe they were before. Anyone who is physically capable of walking was walking. They needed to lighten the load as much as possible. Louis Keysburg kicked Hardcoop out of his wagon, the elderly gentleman.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, Hardcoop's feet became badly injured during the walk, and on October 7th, he was last seen sitting on the side of the trail. Oh, no. And he was just left behind.
That's sad.
Yeah. No, we haven't really...
Why would you do that, though, at whatever age he was? Come on, stay home.
I think, and that was sort of like, he wasn't related to anybody.
Yeah.
He was, I think they said around 70, which in 1846 is like 95 today. So I think they were kind of like, we can't be responsible for him, and he can't really take care of himself because he's so injured. Listen, I don't...
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to give up a space, like it's now between like your family. Some kids are like as young as one versus like a guy who's kind of lived his life at that point.
And who you have really no connection with.
That's so sad.
I know. That, unfortunately, was the last of Hardcoop. So, the Paiute Indians. So... there's an alternating. People are using Indians. People are using Native Americans. I don't think it's as...
I think it depends on who you are. Some of them today, like certain names or others. But yeah, we recognize that is true. So
yes. Please don't yell at me. I'm doing my best here. I Googled how to say Paiute. Watch it be wrong. Okay. So the Paiute Indians killed 21 oxen, stole 18, and badly injured several more.
Hold on. Say that again. How many oxen?
21 were killed, 18 were stolen.
Okay. Oh my God.
By the time October 11th rolled around, 100 head of cattle had been lost.
So how many wagons we got left? Are they...
So if you figure 20...
Do you know if they're like... Okay, because that's a lot of cattle, right? You probably need maybe... Well, I don't know how many cattle you would need. Let's say like two. I'm picturing two.
I think it's two. I think two pull them at a time.
Do they... So they like switch them out and
Probably.
stuff? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sucks. Oh, God.
That's a lot of cattle to travel with, though. That's, I mean... Wolfinger. Such an unfortunate name. I'm so sorry. He had lost most of his cattle at that point, and he decided, since he didn't have anybody to pull it anymore, that he would cache his wagon at Humboldt Sink. Bury it.
Okay. Oh, cache. Like
Cache.
Yeah.
C-A-C-H-E. So Augustus Spitzer and Joseph Reinhardt are like, absolutely, we're going to stay behind, and we're going to help you do that. And then the party went ahead, and they said, we'll meet up with you. And when they met up with them, Wolfinger wasn't with them. And they claimed that he was killed by Native Americans. But much later, on his deathbed, Reinhardt confessed that he killed him.
Why?
So I don't know. I wonder... So he's caching some of his stuff at this point. I'm wondering, this was the couple that people thought were pretty well off. Perhaps they stole his money.
No one would have known.
Speculating. I don't super know. Again, so Reinhardt passes at one of the camps ultimately from, I think, starvation. It was either starvation, exposure, fever, whatever took them. So I'm not super sure who he confessed it to. We'll talk about at the end, sort of, because there was so much taboo around some of what happened. People kept a lot of things to themselves for a long time.
Well, it is weird, like you said, like even with the guy that murdered the other guy, what are you going to do? There's no like jurisdiction or anything.
Right.
It is literally the Wild West.
Yep. Yeah. We have to decide, do we want this person around? So it's,
true.
Well, right. And also, what are you going to do? Like, the Paiute Indians just killed your oxen. Like, they have you are just
Well, you're also on their land.
In their space, and they don't care. Right. And so, maybe they came upon you and were threatened. People don't know. And also, I think people from the East were not as familiar with what was happening between different groups of people in the West at that time. They had just heard stories. So, believable. So, anyway, the party made it to the Truckee River on October 16th. The trail would follow the river into the Sierra Nevada mountains, what was likely to be the worst stretch of the trip.
Right, because you still have to go up.
Yeah. So there was a lot of back and forth at this point about, do we take time to rest? Do we continue on in order to stay ahead of any potential winter storms? It was around this time that William Pike was accidentally killed by William Foster when a gun discharged. So I think people are starting to things are going south. If we have the ability to go, we should probably go. Charles Stanton, who you will remember, had gone ahead with William McCutcheon to get supplies a month and a half ago.
Oh, right.
Yeah. He returned. He finally met back up with the group on October 25th. McCutcheon was ill and couldn't make the trek back, so he stayed at Sutter Fort to recuperate. Charles Stanton brought supplies back, as well as 7 mules and 2 Native Americans who were supposed to help as guides. Their names were Luis and Salvador. Not their given names. They were their Catholicized names.
Yeah.
But that's how I'm going to refer to them, because I don't think we ever know what their real names were. Charles also told them that according to the people back at the fort, they had about a month to make it through the mountains before the winter weather got too bad. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the advice, everybody, along the way. It's really helpful. James Reed and William Herron, now they had gone off because James murdered that dude.
Oh, right.
So they made it to Sutter's Fort on October 28th. James and William McCutcheon, he had stayed back at the fort because he was sick. He had shown up with Stanton.
Yeah.
So James meets up with William McCutcheon. They leave the fort on October 30th with supplies and horses because James is like, yeah, I got banished, but my kids and my wife are still there. So we're going to help them because he also knows how bad off everybody is. Unfortunately, they ran into a section of snow that was too deep to pass. So they had to return to Sutter's Fort. Now, back at the wagon train, George Donner.
Can you imagine just like you get to a certain point, you're like probably knee deep in the snow, and you're like, "Hey, everybody." I'd have been so pissed. Oh my God.
And
we're bringing mountain goats next time.
There's no way to communicate with anybody. There's no way to be like,
to like send,
I'm on my way, or what's the sitch? Like, you guys alive still? Like, there's no.
You just have to find out.
Unknown.
When you get there.
Totally unknown.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
How did people? God, we have it so easy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, back at the wagon train, George Donner injured his hand trying to repair a broken wagon axle. So, George and Jacob's families stayed behind to continue with the repair, and the rest of the group carried on. And at this point, seemed a relatively superficial wound. But we know how that goes.
There's no, like, running water, probably.
No, they barely have non-running water. Right. So, the bigger group made it to Truckee Lake, which is now known as Donner Lake, which is at the foot of the mountain range. It was still about 1,000 feet of elevation up a slope to get there, so they did that. But once they got to the lake, the snow started their first night there. They woke up to 5 feet of snow on the ground.
God. And then what are you supposed to do? You can't go back?
No, no.
Just trapped.
Now, despite the snowfall, they're like, we gotta keep going.
5 feet
5
of
feet.
snow.
5 feet.
Like, for even, like, 5 inches is an inconvenience for us now, when you're just like, crap.
And you have no vehicles to get through it. It's you, 5 feet. Right. You can't just walk through it. No. Most of these people are children.
Right. Oh my God.
So they're like, no, we have to keep going.
How? You're just gonna like tunnel through? Jesus.
Depending on the type of snow, though. It's not like if it's a light, fluffy snow, it's a really heavy snow.
It's not just walking, like you had said. You know, it's like when they were
slog,
right? But also when they were clearing just the boulders and stuff. It takes a while. You have to be like, all right, I'll see you in a day.
Yep.
I'll try to, oh my God. Yeah.
So they attempt to summit the ridge. 2 of them made it up, but the rest couldn't do it. They were just too weak. Everyone headed back down to Truckee Lake. The Donners at this point were still about 6 miles behind at Alder Creek. So that's what I'm going to call it's Alder Creek Camp and the Truckee Lake Camp.
Okay.
At this point, everybody decided to just stay put. And the weather was bad, and they felt like we could just wait it out because we were told it wasn't going to get. So maybe this is like a freak snowstorm, and it'll pass.
How long is 5 feet of snow going to take to melt?
When
it's like impending winter anyway. Like, Jesus. Okay.
And so they went up 1,000 feet to get to the lake. What elevation were they even at to begin with? Like, I wonder what elevation we're talking about. I should look at it.
Yeah, it's not even like a normal, like...
Not sea level.
I mean, no. Wow.
So, there was...
like, just bury me already. Like, I
don't want to suffer like this. So, there were 60 people at the Truckee Lake Camp and 21 at Alder Creek. The Truckee Lake Camp had a couple of existing cabins that had been erected by a wagon train a couple years earlier. They were rough, but they'd kind of have to do. Like, there was no windows. There were doorways, but there were no doors. The roofs had holes in them. Like, it was just supposed to be...
like a crude shelter.
Very basic, and probably for a very short amount of time. The Kesebergs set up a lean-to against one of the cabins housing the Breens. The Eddies, Fosters, Murphys, and Pikes all shared a cabin that was built by William Eddy and William Foster. In a larger cabin about a half-mile away, the Reeds and Graves stayed. Now, and just to give you an idea, like the people, the cabins at Truckee Lake were not close to each other.
Okay.
Like people's journals would say like that they hadn't seen each other in days, some of them, because also the weather was such that they couldn't really go outside.
Well, I'm gonna waste my energy
Right.
tunneling to you guys. No.
I don't care for you. So the Donners set up tents at Alder Creek, and the single men that had traveled with them built crude shelters out of like brush.
Oh my god, I'd be like, I don't want to be a guy anymore. Like, I just want to sit with the kids.
So at the end, it is interesting, but like understandable that the vast majority of people who died were men.
Yeah.
Because they were expending the most energy.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So by November 20th, it had snowed for 8 days straight.
Oh my god, what? How many feet now? Are we up to?
Most of the livestock they had either killed or the weather had killed. Not only that, but the snow buried the bodies of the animals so badly that they couldn't find some of them. So like, you're like, I know I have, maybe it's starved animal carcass, but it's an animal and the meat is essentially there, but I can't even find it because the snow has buried it.
And you're spending more energy if you were to try to dig that. Ugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
At one point, this is an example of we're not all in this together.
Not anymore.
The Graves family sold the Eddies the carcass of one of their starved oxen for $25. That is the price of buying a healthy pair of oxen at the time.
What are you going to do with that $25 if you don't make it out? You know what I mean?
Right?
I'd be like, this is more
Cool.
This is worth more to me now.
Right. I'm sure the Eddies were like, sure, fine.
Yeah,
because I don't even know if I'm going to need this later.
Yeah.
There were continuous discussions regarding trying to cross the mountain pass, but the weather just really seemed consistently awful for about a month. Finally, a group of 17 people took off on snowshoes that they had fashioned with animal hide and ox bows, which are part of the equipment used to harness the teams. They took 6 days worth of rations, a rifle, some pistols, blankets, and a hatchet. 2 of the 17 had to turn around. They just couldn't go any further. One was a 10-year-old boy. So
He went?
yeah. Oh, wait, just the remaining 15 snowshoers were able to make it over the summit. By December 20th, they made it to Yuba River bottoms located at the crest of the Sierra Nevadas. This group of snowshoers ended up being called the Forlorn Hope by historians later. So you can tell how well it went.
Yeah.
This group included Antonio, who was named as somebody's animal handler. And with that discrepancy between Augustus, where he showed up in 2 different, I feel like Antonio was actually with the Wolfingers and not, I think Augustus was used incorrectly there. So Antonio, Luis and Salvador, the Native American guides.
Right.
Patrick Dolan, William Eddy, Jay and Sarah Fosdick, Sarah and William Foster, Franklin and Mary Graves, Lemuel Murphy, Amanda McCutcheon, Harriet Pike, and Charles Stanton. The youngest was 12 years old, Lemuel. 2 sets of parents are on this trip as the snowshoers.
So, sorry. There's a lot of information. So the rest of the people stay behind.
Yes.
Okay.
17 of really probably the most physically capable at that time.
What would you do? Would you just stay and be like, maybe I'll just freeze to death and it won't be that bad?
I
Or
feel like I would
try.
just go.
Would you?
I feel like I would go. Because who would come back for me? Number one, you have no idea. You have no concept of, yes, people are on their way. No, people don't even. I don't even know if the people who left to like if Reed and Heron are alive still, they might not even be able to get back to us.
Right.
Like, you have no concept. And so it's like, move. Because the other thing is, I think you would be like, I'm freezing cold 24/7. If I move, maybe it won't be so bad.
Well, and then, like, I guess the alternative is die moving or die just sitting
Frozen.
there. Yeah.
And I do think, so there are two sets of parents who went as part of the Forlorn Hope who left their children behind. And I think the idea at that point was like, our children are going to die.
Yeah.
We have to try.
That's so crazy.
And you have to trust that these other families, who some of whom haven't been really great the whole time, will care for your children while you're gone. It's so, like, that's an impossible, it seems like such an impossible
And even
decision.
if they survive, you don't know if they're going to be able to find you.
Right.
You know?
Right. So by the time the snowshoers had made it to the Yuba River bottoms, they were out of rations. Charles Stanton was unable to continue, and he told the rest of the group to go on without him. He passed away. His body was found a year later. By Christmas Eve, the snowshoers had run into more snowfall and had become lost. They hadn't eaten in 3 days, and so Patrick Dolan suggested the possibility of killing and eating one of their party. It's unclear how exactly they decided, but ultimately Patrick drew the proverbial short stick. But none of the members of the party were up for killing him. They just couldn't.
Wait a minute.
They just couldn't. Well, so 2 members of the party ended up dying in the night at the camp that would become known as Camp of Death when the snowstorm snuffed out their fire. Antonio and Franklin Graves. 2 more died the next day. Patrick Dolan, after raving incoherently, taking off his clothes, paradoxical undressing, and taking off into the woods, he came back to the fire, but he was dead within a few hours. Jeez. Dolan was the first that the group ate, and despite being fed some by his sister, Lemuel was the second to pass that day. The group processed the rest of the bodies and did their best to divide up the meat so that no one ate their own relative. So that's really the first instance of the group having to decide, like, we have nothing left and people are dying anyway.
Right, because they're on foot, so there's no
animals.
burden, nothing like that. There's, like, nothing they can...
So the other thing is, now, they're at a lake. The camp is at a lake.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows how to fish. It's also freezing cold, so the fish are probably much deeper or further out into the lake. They're trying to hunt, but they're not really equipped to do it. I think one of the members ended up killing a bear at some point, but that was like it. That was all they could do.
Just starving and you kill, that's pretty big.
I mean.
Feat.
So that group is off at the Camp of Death, and the other camps back at the Truckee Lake Camp and Alder Creek, things are also bad news bears. So the remaining members of the group ran out of meat, and they began boiling oxhide, some of which they had been using as roof coverings and rugs. And the way it was described is like it would be boiled down into just like goo. Yeah. Like it wasn't... I guess it doesn't matter at that point. You don't care.
You're going to eat anything.
George Donner's injured hand was becoming progressively worse and had started to turn gangrenous. Bayless Williams, Jacob Donner, Samuel Schumacher, Joseph Reinhardt, and James Smith all passed at the camps, either from fever, exposure, or starvation. On Christmas morning, Mrs. Reed, Margaret, had squirreled away some special food for her kids that she turned into a soup. So she had the foresight to be like, not going to eat this. I'm going to save it. And they were pleasantly surprised.
So for her kids, did anyone else know? I mean, you're like starving at that point.
No, I don't think so. I think because you're also pretty separated. I mean, the Reeds were with... Right. There's so many family names. The Reeds were with one other family in their cabin. So probably not. She probably just like, oh, it's just a stew of nothing. Don't worry about it. And they said that like they were boiling bones over and over and over again to the point that they were just like, by the end, like you could just crush them down with your teeth and swallow them.
Wow.
So by the 30th of December, the snowshoers were out of meat again, despite having 4 people. William Foster suggested killing Luis and Salvador.
Oh, no.
The group didn't agree, thankfully. And William Eddy ended up telling the guides of Foster's plan, and they took off.
Obviously.
Yeah. They're like, clearly, these people don't give a shit about us.
Right.
Jay Fosdick ended up passing in the night due to starvation. They butchered and ate his body. Unfortunately, the group did happen upon Luis and Salvador 10 days later, basically at death's door. So Foster shot them both. And, I mean, from the sounds of it, nobody gave him a hard time at that point. Like,
Yeah. Well, even the people that are dying, I mean, obviously you're not in your right mind, but you're just like, I just want it to end. Like, I don't.
right. And and as the people who are sitting there and being, I can't do anything for you. I don't know I don't have food to feed me.
Right.
I don't have anything to feed you. I'm just watching you waste away to nothing. So I'm sure in people's minds at that point, you were doing a service.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it didn't hurt that they were Native American. And
Yeah.
so, but anyway, I wouldn't put that in anyone's brain. I wouldn't accuse Mr. Foster of that. Just saying the time. So over the course of the following week, the snowshoers came across 2 different Indian villages. They were given food at both, and 6 of them stayed behind at the second village as they were now too weak to keep going.
Yeah. I feel like I live here now.
Thank God. We love you. We're so sorry for everything everybody else has done.
God.
William Eddy got a Native American to help him get to a nearby village, Rancho Johnson. And by village, like, white people live there. The people there went back to retrieve the rest of the group from the Native Americans. During their stay at Rancho Johnson, Eddy sent a letter to the magistrates in Sacramento and San Francisco about the people still stuck at the camps.
Okay, I'm going to ask a dumb question. How do you send a letter?
At that time,
Yeah.
like
Isn't it-
messenger, horseback.
I mean, okay. All right,
Like,
because they're,
hey,
they're on a normal...
The Pony Express.
Okay.
So, in the meantime, I have another list of people who died back at the camps. In the meantime, Charles Berger, Louis Keysburg Jr., the baby, Landra Murphy, Harriet McCutcheon, Margaret and Eleanor Eddy, Augusta Spitzer, Milt Elliott, and Catherine Pike had died back at the camps. Rescue efforts started to be organized in February of 1847. They arrived in October.
Yeah.
So, it's a long ass time.
Well, you can't
Money
get
was-
through the snow.
Money was raised by John Sutter and the San Francisco magistrate to obtain people to search and supplies. The first rescue group, called the First Relief, left Rancho Johnson on February 5th and reached the location of the camp at Truckee Lake on February 19th. So 2 weeks takes them to get there. They reported not seeing anything at first, but when they called out, people started popping up out of holes in the snow. 3 of the 7 rescuers headed down to Alder Creek the next day to check on everybody down there.
Right.
They returned to Truckee Lake on the 21st with 6 people from Alder Creek. 23 survivors left camp with the First Relief, 15 of them under the age of 18.
Wow.
So 3 of the Donner kids, William Hook, Margaret Reed and 2 of her kids, Edward and Simon Breen, 3 of the Graves kids, Mary and William Murphy, Naomi Pike, Philippine and Ada Keysburg made the trip with the First Relief. Doris Wolfinger, again, whose husband had been killed and now she was on her own. John Denton, Noah James, and Eliza Williams. Sadly, Ada Keysburg and John Denton did not make the trip back and passed on the way. William Hook He was Jacob Donner's stepson. He passed away after making it to safety.
Oh my God.
He broke into the food at Bear Valley and binged himself.
Wow. So
After
it's like refeeding syndrome or something. Yeah.
And after so much time, it killed him. I think, I want to say he was like 12.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't know refeeding syndrome could actually kill you.
So, the same day that the first relief left camp, the second relief, led by James Reed, now, left Rancho Johnson. This group arrived at Truckee Lake on March 1st. 3 members of that relief stayed behind to help the remaining survivors prep for the next rescue group. 17 more survivors left with the rest of the second relief. 14 of them, 14 out of 17, were 15 years old or younger.
It's so weird that a lot of them were kids. You would think that the
So
kids
many
would be, but maybe they weren't doing a lot of the work, I suppose.
Right. They needed less calorie intake, I think. And people said that like the women store fat more than men do because it's great. We're so blessed. And they weren't doing the same work. The children certainly weren't.
Right.
They needed a lot less. One of the relief groups said the children, while they were on their way back, some of the children started trying to eat the fringe off of their clothing. And they were just like, what the? But they didn't realize that they had been eating oxhide as when they could. So they looked at it as food. So there's a lot of, I have all of the names of them, but I feel like it gets lost in the, I'll spare you. The second relief got caught in a terrible storm at the top of the pass and ended up stuck for 2 days. By the time it was over, most of the survivors couldn't proceed. The rescuers continued down with 3 of the children, Patty and Thomas Reed and Solomon Hook, and they left the other 14 people behind at what would become known as Starved Camp. Isaac Donner, Elizabeth Graves, the elder, the mom of the Graves children, and her son Franklin Jr. passed at the camp. It is believed that the survivors ate their bodies while they waited for the next relief to come get them. Understandably. Yeah. That relief showed up 5 days later. So the third relief showed up at the pass 5 days later. One member of that relief took those 11 survivors down the mountain while the rest continued on to the camps. By the time the third relief arrived at the camps on March 13th, only 9 people were left alive, and only 5 of those were able to make the trip back. 3 of the Donner children, Simon Murphy and Jean-Baptiste Trudeau.
So it's been almost a year since
they left.
Beginning. Yeah.
There were 2 more rescue attempts made, but both were forced to head back. On April 17th, a salvage party arrived at the Truckee camp with the goal of collecting as much of the belongings as possible. The plan was to sell what they could to help provide for the children who had been orphaned in the ordeal.
Oh my God.
They found only Louis Keseberg alive.
He's still alive?
Still alive.
Oh my God.
He's
eating everybody else.
Well, Keseberg was found with the Donner's money, jewelry, and gun. He claimed that Tamsin had given it to him to get to her children. George Donner had likely only died a few days prior to the salvage party's arrival. Now, this man had been dealing with gangrene in his arm.
Yeah.
How?
I mean, yeah.
Months. Mm-hmm. Maybe the cold temperature slowed it down? I don't know. Tamsin was really, she took care of him. She sent her children off at every single relief and said, I'm going to stay with my husband. Even though I'm sure she knew he was going to die.
Yeah.
When he passed, George, Tamsin had traveled to the Truckee Lake camp, planning to proceed out of the mountains to reunite with her surviving children. Keseberg claimed she'd arrived cold and weak. He told her to rest for the night and continue on in the morning, but she had died overnight.
Oh, my God.
Keseberg did admit to eating her flesh, but he denied any accusations that he killed her. He was found with a pot with human flesh in it. Okay, yep. He's fully admitted that.
Yeah.
He admitted to one of the fathers, one of the Williams, yes, I ate your son. And that father said, if I ever see you again, I will kill you. Now, he didn't kill him, the kid. He just, what did you,
Yeah.
I get it. Whatever. I'm not going to judge anybody in that scenario, but you gotta like,
I don't know. I guess I would. I don't know. It's I'll never experience, knowing what it's like to lose a kid,
Right.
but also they're not there.
I
You
know.
know, like
and the Williams ate people. So
what are you gonna do? Just
Right.
bury him and
Right.
the animals are gonna eat him anyway.
So, people from the salvage party did go on to tell the story that Keseberg had murdered Tamsin, and he tried to sue them for defamation. He won $1, and he had to pay court fees.
How much is $1 back then? Not enough.
Not
Not
enough.
enough to buy 2 oxen.
I know exactly. You can't even buy oxen. He ended up dying in basically poverty. So, the remaining structures at the camps were burnt down. In 1918, June 1918, a statue was erected of a pioneer family at the spot where the Breen Keseberg cabin had likely stood. It is now listed as a California Historical Landmark. In 1927, the Donner Memorial State Park was created, and the last survivor was Isabella Breen. She was 11 months old when the trip started. She died on March 25th, 1935, at almost 90 years old.
Wow.
It is believed that 21 members of the party were cannibalized. Only 2 of them had been killed specifically for that reason, unless you believe that Keseberg killed Tamsin. But I don't think I do.
She probably had like a broken spirit at that point too. Like her husband finally died.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe she was probably sick anyway.
She doesn't know what happened to her kids.
Yeah.
Like I said, the Truckee Lake is now Donner Lake, and that pass in the mountains is Donner Pass. The families, the relatives of the survivors have gone to the park, and they'll tell them, they like sign I think a book in particular. Relatives will go in and they say, can you sign that you were here and all of that stuff. And, I think some of the families are like, well, we knew it happened, but like our family didn't eat anybody. Everybody else did, but we did. And it sounds like there was no therapy in 1846.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody could process what had happened at that point.
I know. I was thinking that like even if you did survive all the way to the end, you'd have been so messed up mentally and probably physically. There's probably some long-term damage.
Oh, terrible long-term. I mean, and, some people did go on to have success in the California Gold Rush.
Right. That was like the one, at least we're already here.
Right. Haha, we beat you,
Yeah.
sort of.
Ugh.
So it was, it's such a tricky topic because you're like, people were not great to each other, but it's a matter of survival.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about starvation, I don't believe coming together is really gonna help you at that point.
No.
I don't know what the wildlife situation was there. But I'm also like, how much ammunition did they have?
Yeah. And they probably didn't, it wasn't like they had bows and stuff. It was like
Right.
rifles and then, yeah.
And you're also already terribly weak. By the time you've gotten to Truckee Lake, you're weak.
Right.
And you're going to hunt big game? How are you going to get them back?
Right.
How are you going to chase them and then get them back and then process them? At one point it said they were eating mice that came into the cabin. You had to.
Yeah.
They had to eat the family dog.
Oh.
So anyway, the long and short of it was I was like, what's the one thing you know about the Donner Party? And I was like, oh, cannibalism. It was a part of it. And I think a necessary evil.
Yeah.
But it was so much more than like this idea that we have to get to the West. Like everything will be better if we get to California. And I don't necessarily think that many of these families were in any sort of bad way prior.
Right.
There was just, I think, the promise of more
Yeah.
in California. And
well, and you could be like the first ones and, but it's funny because of all the topics we've done, because you and I talk about stuff, we've learned stuff along the way, things that we didn't know, like scientifically or historically or whatever. I keep thinking back to like one of our first episodes with the whaling, boats and all that, and that it was like not an unspoken thing. It was a rule that if you guys needed food, you weren't going to be like persecuted when you came back, or at least lawfully. Right. If you had to eat some of the people on board, and sort of the same thing. But it's like, but then I'm thinking, because I learned in that topic that the other people that were starving probably died from starvation. They have no fat on them.
Yeah.
So even though you're eating like the muscle, there's probably nothing left of muscle. So the energy it takes to like even metabolize that stuff,
right? You're
expending energy that way, and you're not, satiated. You're yeah.
Like... And that was a couple things. So the villages that the snowshoe group ended up happening upon were like, oh my God. Like at one point, I think they said in one of the Native American villages, the people like scattered at first because they were like, good.
Yeah, like zombies
are coming in. Like, what are you bringing in here? The rescuers, obviously, when they got there, I do think that some of the stories were sensationalized. Like it was surrounded by arms and legs and like, oh, I don't think that's true.
You just have like a pile of
but
bones.
Also like, I don't know, it's really weak at the time. Right. Drag a human body around. There have been archaeological studies done at the camps, and they haven't really found human bone.
They ate them all.
Well, that's what she's like. So it's hard to say, but I'm like, okay, even if we say they weren't cannibalized, they died.
Right.
Isn't it more likely that you wouldn't find the remains because they were cannibalized?
Yeah. Than
if they had just buried them?
Yeah.
Don't you think? So. Especially where the whole thing about they were just recooking and recooking and recooking that there's nothing left at that point.
All the marrow's gone and you're just like, yeah.
So it's, but it's crazy because there's like a highway that runs through there now and you're just like, oh my God, it's so wild.
Yeah.
So wild to think about the things that they had to do. And we barely even talked about, interactions with Native Americans, interactions with just terrible people who are taking advantage of naive settlers who, I feel like for a stretch there, they were pretty lucky until they weren't anymore.
Yeah.
But
starvation seems just one of the most horrific ways to go because it's slow.
Yeah.
And you still have to keep pushing. At one point, they couldn't ride in the wagon.
Right. You're too heavy at whatever you are. And after the fact, when the story about what happened there became public, Hastings started receiving death threats.
Yeah.
Because you're a fucking liar, bro. And like, to what end? Did you get money for every person that went that way? Like, what even was that? It's just it's so weird.
I mean, I'm glad he got some sort of repercussions out of it because it's like, you're a dick. Like, there were kids, like really
so
young
many
kids.
Young kids.
Ugh.
And the people who lost entire parents, and like kids who are orphans forever, lost both parents. And like you said, starvation, now you are watching people you love starve to death.
Mm-hmm. Or get eaten.
And the psychological, it's just, it's really, really crazy. So,
Yeah.
but I thought, I mean, there was a lot of,
You did a really good job.
thank you so much. It was a lot of information. That's why this is a one and done today rather than a multi-episode. Because
Yeah.
I had like 14 pages of written notes on this, and I didn't know. I had no idea. Like, I just, oh, you were caught in a snowstorm. Like, I didn't know it was just this perfect storm of just horrible stuff that happened to people who were definitely taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And
You're just like, I don't know. If my husband was like, we have to manifest destiny, I'd be like, we're not manifesting anything.
why don't you manifest yourself into the chair over there and
Yeah.
settle down?
Well, then
Go take a walk.
I was thinking about, wow, what was it? The Bloody Benders. But that was
Yeah.
more the gold rush, right? That was later?
That was later in the 1800s.
Because you had said a lot of them would like have their husbands go or whatever, the men, and then be like, yeah, settle, and then I'll come later. You know, I kind of feel like that would have been the better way to do things. Like, send the men out, and you're gonna take, because there's, like you said, eventually having that many people, you have to feed everybody.
Right. It's how can it be a benefit?
But you can be on horseback or whatever and bring some supplies for you and whatever men you take with you, and slowly, like, okay, this is gonna be, do what they were doing, moving boulders and tree trunks and whatever, and then in like 10 years I'll come in,
right,
like, with my kids and whatever.
Well, but at the same time, you're like, George Donner was a farmer.
Yeah.
They had like 85 children.
Right.
And theirs were relatively young for his age. I was thinking the ages of George and Tamsin, she definitely started having kids. Well, I don't know if she started having kids late or if they just, maybe they didn't survive. I don't know. But her kids were young for a woman who was in her 40s at the time. Some of them are probably working the farm, but not all of them. And so then he leaves for God knows how long. I don't know. It's this like balance of, do you just come with me and we do it all in one fell swoop? It's crazy. Or because if he takes off and heads west and something happens to him, you never know.
And now you're out, the guy, the main farmer.
Yep.
And you don't have a place to go in the west either.
And what do you own? Do you own anything? Or does the farm get taken away because you are a woman? Or, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. Like, I I was sort of quiet with this one. I'm sure people are like, yay. But it's just so stunning because it is true. Like, most of the time when someone says donor party, you think like cannibalism, and that's it. And you're like, that's crazy that they ate each other. And it's like, is it though? Is it really? Like,
it's just,
you would have to.
You're almost like, the way cannibalism is such a central theme around the story, you almost expect that there was more murder.
Yeah.
But they just went like, he's dead anyway. What are we going to... The ground's frozen. I could bury him in snow.
Right, that's true.
So then he's found in the spring. Terrible.
And
or
animal,
taken off.
Right.
So what do we do? We got to try to keep alive. And you have so many children. People's immediate, it's nature. We are meant to keep our offspring alive.
Yeah.
So you do what you have to do. And I don't know. I don't think anybody can. I think this was such a terrible situation of people who were trusting of people who said that they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And you had grifters and people who saw opportunities to take advantage, and they did at the expense of around half of the party died.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if they kind of, not obviously nobody foresaw like this happen, but I wonder if they were like, you know what, there's probably going to be a little bit less of us by the time we get there.
Yes.
Like,
I'm sure that was true.
This is your last trip, like, especially with the older guy. Yeah, I don't know. He didn't get off easy either. He just died,
God,
by himself.
who even knows? Because you don't even know, like, was he very ill? Was he,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
did he die slow? Now he's been left with nothing.
Right.
They left him.
Exposure, if
Right.
anything, yeah.
He's an old man who's physically unwell. He can't defend himself. It's just, and like you said, I think you go into it with the expectation that we're going with this many people. Chances are not everybody's going to make it because at least one of these things will happen. But they had like every one of the things
Right.
to them. And it's just like, oh my God, imagine getting through, they get through Great Salt Lake Desert and you're like, oh, there's a spring. Now we're ready. We did it. Oh,
5 feet of snow.
no. Like, it's so crazy.
Oh my God.
I mean, resiliency for anybody to make it that long. People did make it a stunningly long time.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, like you and I come from pilgrim stock, and even that, I'm like, I'm not my ancestors. I would have been like, just throw me overboard.
It's been 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, my tummy's grumbly. Like,
Yeah,
my blood sugar's low.
it does feel like, have we lost our resilience?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
1,000%.
as a population, like, if shit hits the fan, like, are we just, I feel like I'd be like, I'm too hungry. Just,
I've never been more miserable. Listen, the prospect of all portions of that trip sound horrible.
yes. That's what I said.
The wooden wagons, they don't have shocks and struts.
No.
Holy crap. Ugh. You're behind these massive animals all day long.
Yeah.
It's hot because you're on the Great Plains.
Yep.
The summer. It's just, oh, goodness.
And it's not like you can stop and be like, everybody have a snack. You're like, no. It's like once a day, probably.
Yep.
We just have to keep going. Oh, my God. Well, that sounded perfectly miserable.
It did. You know, I came upon a post on Instagram that was like a bunch of statistics about people in the winter. And like, so like a lot of what they were talking about are people who live like probably closer to the Arctic Circle. But they're like, these people spend 6 months out of the year sleeping 14 hours a day. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
See, don't tell me we were meant to work
Right.
through the winter time. My inclination to knock out at 7:00 in the evening is correct.
Yeah.
My DNA knows what's up.
Well, I'm perfectly sure I would have, like, before we even got to the desert, I would have been like, I can't. I'm done.
I would have gone with Sarah. Sarah didn't make it to the first,
That cap cut thing, or the guy crying, I'm done. Cut the mic, I'm done.
You know what? This looks like a good place to stay.
Yes.
I know. This is why. But this is also why we didn't. Our genes are gonna stop here. So,
Yeah. True.
but we're weak. Anyway, so
Wow.
that's good
job.
Thank you so much.
You
I
do
hope,
a very good job on the longer topics.
I hope so. It was a lot of names.
Yeah.
I have a feeling I'm gonna let us listen to the edit and be like, what? Good luck paying attention to this one, people.
Yeah. No, it was very good.
But you know what? I would be fascinated to go and see, like, they have a memorial where the fireplace, quote unquote, like chimney of one of the cabins is, and some people have trekked on foot
No.
the pass in the winter.
Oh, no, thank
But
you.
of course they're wearing like
Gear.
and they have snowshoes and stuff, and they're like, this is terrible. They have snacks. To get a feel for kind of what it was, but
I can imagine.
the other thing I was thinking about was what were those women wearing?
True.
Dresses?
Yeah, but I feel like they probably had like pantaloons underneath.
At
I
that
don't
point
know.
you're like,
Give me some pants.
Don't worry about my modesty. We're all gonna die.
Maybe, yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
goodness. Well, all right, everybody. Well, I will have a shorter than hour and 45-minute topic next time.
Wow.
And pray for me while I find time to edit this week. But thanks, everybody. And we will see you guys later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relativelyweirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.